All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to what episode is this? 4? Episode 4 of going live and Q&A with no proper script. We're just talking and sharing ideas with each other. I want to thank you all for all your lovely questions in the past. That's so interesting. This exchange of ideas is just really wonderful for me personally and for my team. So with that said, welcome to the studio again. I've got Michelle here.
Hi guys.
I've got Mike over there. So we are enjoying, normally everything that goes out of my office is so polished and every detail, I believe, is perfect when it leaves. So this is so nice because this is not about that. This is about being raw and messy and completely analog, almost anti-professionalism, and honest. So you all probably know how bad I am with technology. That's why I'm surrounded by brilliant, much younger people. Michelle just said, "We got you." Thank you, Michelle. So, but it's also kind of nice to enjoy not being good at technology and to hold up books and drawings and bits of artwork and scraps of notes, and share things in a much more raw way, perhaps the way we would share with our grandparents, or holidays, someone gives you a greetings card. There's someone writes you a postcard. I don't know if anyone ever writes postcards to you guys anymore and you actually receive a handwritten note, but there's something really beautiful about that. Anyway, I want to begin today again. I'm going to start each session off with gratitude of inspiration. And today, I've mentioned this before, but we're going to do a bit of a deeper dive into one of my all-time hero artists, Van Gogh. So when I'm always going back to my student days, because I really think our early days are the days that shape our older days. And for some reason, Van Gogh's work just made total sense to me. I've mentioned this before when he was working in Arles, and he was having real struggles with mental health. He was there was something incredible about the way he drew and painted the landscapes there. And it's the Mediterranean. It's very similar to the landscapes that I grew up in. So you've got the cedar trees, you've got the olive trees, you've got the rocks, the rough dry grass burnt from the sun, the herbs in the mountains, sometimes wild flowers. And then there's the people, and the way he painted and drew people is really amazing, because he didn't really differentiate between a rock and one of his human subjects. So I thought, okay, before I even thought of photography, I've got to learn to see how he sees. So earliest student work. I'm going to start with this first, Mike. I've got one of my books here. Right, we look at these portraits. Hold on, I've got to move it this way. You see that? And the tree. Okay. Then we see this landscape here. There's a very famous picture called Starry Night. So the way he painted this stuff, showing real emotion in the sky, and real emotion in the way skin moves over flesh and bones, and the way light hits fabric. To describe that something is made of coarse fabric in someone's jacket or smooth fabric is something that really moved me. So, Mike, where's that painting? Yeah. So I thought I should do a self-portrait because Van Gogh's very famous for doing selfies. So this is my selfie. I was probably 1986. So I don't know how old I was then, 15, 16, 17. And you can see the idea from Starry Night. I'm trying to understand how light goes, and you probably see the beginnings of a kind of vignette that I was trying to articulate, which I later came into my photography. And then you see how the structure, I'm trying to describe texture of hair and skin, especially here as the light hits the shoulder. So that's all stuff that made a huge impression. And people ask me, is it bad to copy work? It is bad to copy work if you think that the work that you've done from copying is a thing in itself. But if you think of it as a technical learning exercise, I think it's really important because by trying to do it yourself, no matter how good or bad it is, you are discovering new ideas, new techniques. It will never be the same, but it will take you to another place. So then you think of there's other things. Van Gogh, let me see if I can find a picture. Well, this one is good. This is a very famous. We're starting again.
Mm-hmm. But it's the same video.
So we can edit it.
I think so.
All right.
We're on.
All right, we're back. Hallelujah with tech. Give us a thumbs up if you're all receiving me loud and clear. So where did I lose my friends here, roughly?
We're talking about the lines.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so let's go back. Here we are with some lines, chiseling things out. Along the jacket, along the nose. All these things are accent points where you're drawn to it as a really beautiful edge. If you look here on my jacket, you'll see there's a line there of the seam. That, I would be drawn to that. So I thought, how can I do that in photography? Now, with my Greek pictures, bear with me, folks. Mike, I might need you. I need your muscles. This is a project we're working on. We've been working on for 40 years now. If you show the first one, this is going to be my next book, and it's the most personal work I have. All right. So, bear with us. Can you see this? So this is my uncle. He's sadly passed away now, but he was a legendary figure. Look at the line on his hand. Okay, so that's me being inspired by Van Gogh and this sort of emotional chiseling out of all the textures. So let's show them also the other one of the old lady's hands. And so it's really nice to share with you these little details because people wonder what makes an artist's work sort of obviously theirs. You right, Mike?
Yep.
All right. So here's another one. There's another line there. It's a beautiful edge of one texture against another. And she's just come back from church. She's all dressed up in a Sunday best, and you see the details around, there's lines around the buttons. So all this actually helps reinforce the story. So I thought that would be interesting to share with you. In time, we are probably going to start getting deeper and deeper into photography technique. And then I'm going to start going into how we do that in the future, but we're not quite there yet. We're still dancing around the edges. Okay, so sorry about the technical faults, but that's just reality. Michelle, what's our first question?
Well, first, I know your dear friend Pete Saunders is joining us today in the chat. He, as you were telling that story, he wrote, Uncle Stelio, I miss him. So just thought you might want to do a shout out to Pete, and he did share a question, which
yeah, please, well. Yeah.
So Peter writes, His father was extremely charming. His mother is wonderfully loving and caring, but both shared a great sense of humor. What tools do you employ to engage with your subjects?
Well, firstly, big shout out to Pete. Pete is my oldest and dearest friend, and we used to draw together when we were really young. And actually, Pete, as he says, joined me in Greece on some of our early trips where we were all just trying to figure out how we're going to be creative together. And he used to sit with me in the village square and draw. And magical times of two young guys before we even went to art college, just trying to find ourselves and study the people and the world around us. So Pete was also an amazing drummer, and he was the drummer we had a jazz band. And so we called him Pete the Beat, and I still think of him as Pete the Beat. So Pete the Beat, love you, man. Sense of humor. Well, funny that you say that, Pete, because you always had an amazing sense of humor, and that was like one of the anchors of our friendship. So humor is really important. You can't be funny and not have empathy and not be humble. The whole point of being funny is that you're probably sending up yourself first. And actually, I think that's really important. And so many of my shoots, there's a funny little moment that's natural. You can't construct it. But if you're comfortable enough to crack a joke with someone, obviously, if we think about it, it's a sign of affection. Obviously, every culture has a different type of sense of humor, and I've had to learn to be respectful. The Brits is very cutting, direct, subtle, but complicated sense of humor. The Americans have a very different sense of humor. And every culture has their own brand of it. So you can't go in with one sense of humor and be successful in another always. So you have to be very sensitive. But people are funny. Like in Greece, a lot of the old ladies, they're funny. You know, they give you a funny look if they're not sure about something, or they'll eye roll if they see something that's ridiculous. I remember sitting in the cafe in the main square. It's called the Cafe Neon. One day in wintertime, and I was surrounded by all the old boys drinking their afternoon coffee, debating about politics around the world. And I remember they had a small TV in the corner, and they were showing. This is in the early 90s, I think, or in the 80s, and there's something on the news about Michael Jackson, and it was the period where he was all in glitter, and he had the glove, and I remember we were all watching it, and I was just thinking, I wonder what all these old boys kind of make. They're all farmers and fishermen, what they make of seeing that on TV. And everyone on TV in those days was saying, the news anchor was saying, Michael Jackson's arrived on tour, it's amazing. And all the old boys just eye rolled. And it was just such a funny moment that everything that Michael Jackson was striving for was irrelevant to these people. So it's a cultural difference, but the wit that you see, how people interpret. And then when I'm on a shoot, I mean, humor is a really big thing. And if you can spar with someone, especially someone of power, using humor, then that's a really great way to build a connection. And often it's the courage to dare to say something a bit cheeky. But if you do it with love and respect, you kind of always just get away with it. I remember we worked with Condoleezza Rice, legendary diplomat. She was the first woman of color to be Secretary of State in America. And lovely lady. She was very respectful. We had a great time together. And at the end of we got to talk about really interesting things, how music, she was a musician first. She was a concert pianist. So how harmony and discord helped her understand diplomacy in negotiations, which I thought was really interesting. So we ended up going into this place that she's never really talked about before. And at the end of the shoot, she sort of leaned forward and we were laughing together, and she said, "Oh, you're good." And I said, you're not so bad yourself. And I'm not sure you're supposed to say that to someone of her stature, but she liked it because it's cheeky sense of humor. And I love those moments where we dare to kind of tease each other and find common ground. But no one has a better sense of humor than my friend Pete the Beat. So tribute to my friend Pete. All right, next question.
Yeah, so we've got a question from Arvin joining us here live. Obviously you have a very specific style of photographing, but how do you keep it original? How do you avoid using the same composition framework? How does that change through your portraiture?
Oh, interesting. You mean, how do I not repeat myself?
Yeah.
Oh, that's really hard. And I have this debate with myself every time we do a shoot, because it's like, here we go again. There's the apple box. There's the white background. And I'm looking at that white background, and I'm just in this almost panic mode of, how the hell am I going to find something new today? And if I'm going to be really honest, you can't always find something new. We're all human and we're not machines. And there isn't a magic button that says original or new. It's a search. It's like a constant struggle to find something that's just based on instinct. So the truth is, it's just a terrifying, beautiful, exciting, lonely struggle. And my subject is trying to go there with me. They don't really understand what I'm seeing, but I also don't understand what they're feeling, because I don't know their human experiences they've even had just that morning before they got to me. So we're both trying to find this thing. But occasionally you come up with something that is just magical, because even if I had a preconceived shape, which I try to avoid, but even if I did fall back on that, the person who's interpreting that shape is a different person to the person I may have found doing something like that years ago. And so they're going to interpret it in a different way. And sometimes, obviously a similar composition gives you a totally different perspective. And I can give you an example. Behind me, this way, is Bill Clinton. So if you look at the composition of Bill Clinton, obviously people call it the crotch shot, and they read into it that his legs are spread apart, and it's the tie is an arrow pointing down to his crotch, and the hands are really big. And so they read into it all those stories about Clinton's legacy as a sort of very flirtatious, to put it one way, president. Also, you could say it was his downfall as well as a legacy. So that's that picture. Or that was the interpretation of that picture. But I also photographed Putin leaning back in his chair. Not the headshot, but there's a 3/4 shot of Putin that's almost the same composition. And Putin in that picture is performing power. And I did that at the end of our session when I'd felt comfortable enough to push him that far. Now, it's a very similar composition, but both men arguably have been two of the most powerful men in the world, completely interpret that shape in a totally different way, because when you look at it, they both give you very, very different moods. Clinton gives you a sense of charisma, joy, seduction, the party president. Putin is about authority, power, strategy, and almost could say lack of empathy at the cost of power. But that's just my interpretation. I'm not in a position to say what these people are really like, but I was just in the room. So there you go. You know, sometimes something similar is actually something very, very different.
Cool.
Next.
So a little bit just about your interactions with subjects. A studio here, I think called Falkenstein Photography, asks, has there ever been a moment behind the camera when you felt that the subject was photographing you more than the other way around, as if the scene itself was penetrating, inspiring, or even changing you?
Well, that actually happened not that long ago. One of our Platon's dialogue films that we will be posting in the future, I hope, is of John Lithgow, who recently sat for me. And I had an amazing time with John Lithgow. He is one of the sweetest people I've ever met. Legendary actor, but so sweet and charming and interesting, but interested in what I was doing, perhaps even more than my interest in him. And he actually said to me, I'm just as interested in you as you are in me. Very few people have ever said that. So at one point, he took the camera off me and he took a picture of me. That's never happened before, and I would never normally allow that to happen. But he did it in such a beautiful way. It was actually a privilege. And we were at a film festival. What film festival was it? Palm Springs Film Festival. That's when I photographed him twice. The first time I met him was at Palm Springs. And we built a small studio there, and I was photographing all the sort of legendary actors who had won awards that year. I think it was last year, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So he was in this great film called Conclave, which I recommend you should all see. It's very interesting, and his performance is brilliant. But Isabella Rossellini is also in the film, and I used to be besotted by Isabella Rossellini when I was young. When I was like 16, 17, she was just like my idol, and her mum, Ingrid Bergman, was the same to me. I had Casablanca poster on my wall when I was a kid in my bedroom. So when Isabella Rossellini walked in as part of the cast picture I was taking of the group of people in Conclave, I confessed to her, I said, it's just such after all these years to meet you, I can't tell you what it means to me. And John Lithgow said, okay, give me the camera again. He took the camera off me and he said, stand in front of the white background with Isabella. And he took a picture of me and Isabella Rossellini together on my set with my camera. So that was the first time it's ever really become completely organic. And it was lovely. It created a human moment. Sometimes we have to dare to break the wall and be human first. And if we mean well, and we're doing it with humility, humor, curiosity, and respect, then it's an incredible thing. But breaking a wall without respect can be a very dangerous thing and reckless. But if you really are curious about the wall you're trying to break through, and you're actually trying to build a bridge rather than a wall, that is the most magical mindset to be in. So cheers to John Lithgow and Isabella Rossellini.
Yeah, that's a great joke.
Yeah, that's good.
So we've got two questions in the comments that are kind of similar from Ricardo and Marcelo. They're both curious about, any struggles you may have had in the career. What do you do to stop feeling stuck or stagnant? Are there times that you felt discouraged and unmotivated to continue? How do you overcome and power through?
Well, we all get stuck. We all have, Leonard Cohen, one of my heroes, all my shoots have been really, the good ones have been lessons in life as well as trying to capture someone's character. And I always ask these people stuff about their life because I actually want to know. Leonard Cohen had just come out of a Buddhist monastery, I think for like 2 years or something like that. It was a long time. And he'd just made a new album, and I was invited to his house in Montreal, I think, in Canada, to take his portrait. And, you know, you got to imagine I arrived outside and he's looking out of his window. It's a square window on the first floor of his house in Montreal, ordinary like house. And the window is like a square around him, and he's sitting there looking out. He's got sunglasses on, he's got his pork pie hat, a black suit, tie, and he was, I think, smoking a cigarette. I can't remember, but he just looked incredible. It was like a photograph right there. And when I walked in, him, he raised his voice above a whisper. It's almost as if, you know, his years of meditation in this monastery had just gone in so deep that I've never met anyone that was just so, at that moment in their life, seemed to be at peace with the world, philosophically and physically. So I asked him this same question, you know, what is it when we win and when we lose? And how should we cope with loss? How does he cope with loss? And he said, life is nothing but a set of winning streaks and losing streaks. And sometimes you're winning and sometimes you're losing. You can't win all the time. You very rarely lose all the time. And then he said, there's this thing called the masterpiece. So I said, what's that? And he said, the masterpiece is our inevitable decline. And I said, well, why do you call it a masterpiece? He said, because our inevitable decline is something that you cannot outsmart. You could be the most powerful person in the world, but eventually your journey or your winning streak or your authority disappears. That's inevitable. So it kind of changes your mindset. So going back to your question, how do we deal with difficult times? Well, I think you just have to understand that it's just a losing streak. And it could be for a day. Sometimes it's prolonged for a month. Sometimes it's a couple of years. It feels like the wilderness sometimes. But you just kind of have to work through it and know that it's all temporary. You know, victories are never permanent, and losses are never permanent either. It's all temporary moments, and we just walk through it. So I'm not sure I answered your question totally, but philosophically, it passes. What's really important as an artist is that you keep trying. And the hardest thing is when you feel like you're in a losing streak and you feel lonely and you're not validated and no one is really respecting your work or you as a person. It takes so much strength in those moments to be creative. And if all of us are, if any of you are artists or creative thinkers tuning in today, and I'm sure most of you, if not all of you are, we all know that money and supporting yourself is a really difficult thing too. And the times when there is no work around, as a professional, that is the time you have to be most creative because you're not being distracted by commerce. You've got time on your hands. So that's when you experiment and you spend that time reinvesting in your future and in your future work. Because eventually the losing streak passes, things kick up again, and you're called upon to deliver gigs. And of course, once that happens, you can't really experiment during that time. There's no time. So you fall back on the lonely times when you build up all these ideas in the dark. But the problem is that we will find that when we're stressed and feeling vulnerable, we don't always feel creative. But that's when we have to be creative and think of those difficult times as a gift. It's time to roll up the sleeves and be a proper artist during those times. Okay, next question.
Yeah, so shifting gear a little bit, Christian's asking, going into a little bit more of the technical side of photography here.
Okay, I'll do my best.
Christian's curious to know, what is the best gear to begin portrait photography? What did you use when you first started out?
The gear?
Yeah.
Okay, well, everyone, you'll all find, this is for the photographers tuning in. By the way, in time, as I say, we're going to start getting deep into photography. But that's a very specialized thing. So for now, I'm really enjoying the broader conversation. And as many of you probably know, I'm quite elusive when it comes to getting too technical, because I never want to distract us from the most important thing, which is the human connection. But we're dipping our fingers or our elbow into the water, or our toes into the water lightly today. But in time, in the next few months, we're going to start getting heavy duty with photography questions. So the first gear, everyone has, photography is a tool, and everyone feels differently about what feels natural as a tool, same as a musical instrument. Why is a viola more natural to someone than a violin or a cello? Why is a Stratocaster better for a guitar player than a Gibson? I don't know. It's just what feels right. They give you different feelings, different tones. Same with a camera. So I actually know so little about cameras because I've only ever used a few in my life. I tried taking pictures with lots of different cameras, but only two made sense. When I'm on location, my cousin, whose also name is Peter, another great Peter in my life, used to work at Leica, and he used to lend me a camera to practice on the weekends. And those are the things I took to Greece the first time. And for me, that was amazing for location and natural light. It always has to be raw, really grainy, low lighting conditions. The freedom those cameras gave me, and the fact that they're so basic, you make it completely manual. You have to do everything. So, okay, that's harder work at the beginning, but in the end, you are in full control of that little piece of equipment. But when I picked up a Hasselblad for the first time, suddenly that was for studio. The way you hold it, the way you look down into it, the feeling of the shutter releasing, it just felt natural, like I felt an extension of my arm. And I remember they had one at college. It was a bit beaten up, so I used that. It felt good. And then I just received a little bit of grant money, which was supposed to be for food, rent, usual student stuff. And I just blew the year's money on walking past. I walked past a photo shop, and it's like one of those scenes in a movie where in the window there was a little pedestal, and there was a Hasselblad with a standard lens on it. It was all silver, and it had a silver little plaque on it saying classic. And I just thought, that's mine. So I blew that day all my money on it. I think I was living on what do you call them? Noodle.
Ramen noodles, cup noodles.
Pot noodle things. I lived on pot noodle. Pete would remember a lot of this. For a year and a half, consequently, because of this disastrous decision that day. But the feeling of this camera was just magical. And you know what really breaks my heart is that I think someone nicked it, because I can't find that camera anymore. Oh. Yeah, I used to have it. I don't know. We have so many people, in our operation over the 40 years, and I can't find where it's gone. And whoever's got my Hasselblad classic series, I'll never forgive you. I want that camera back, man. Yeah. But anyway, I've been shooting a similar camera all my life, and eventually the shutter release with the auto wind at the bottom was better because of the sheer volume we were shooting. You couldn't keep winding this thing forever because of the sheer volume. But that's the gear I started with, but only because it made sense to me. It might not make sense to you. So the real thing is use your feelings with the gear and just take a moment to hold it in your hands and say, does this go into my body? Does my body go into this? Can we make really beautiful things together, me and this piece of machinery? And you have to have those quiet moments with your tools, because they are that's what you're going to make great art with. So I always found those quiet moments, holding the camera, feeling it, taught myself to load film in the dark. So when I'm distracted, I can still load while I'm talking to someone, while I'm watching a problem in the background. These things, it has to become an extension of your body. Okay, next question.
So talking about your personal style of shooting, Tendo Santos is asking, is portraiture always what you wanted to do, or is that something that just developed naturally over your career?
I've always been fascinated by people. Maybe on one of my next openings with inspiration, I'll see if I can find it. I used to do this thing called contour drawing. They taught us this at college, where you have a little book about this big and a little notebook, and you draw someone without looking down at the page. So your eye just follows the contours of, their nose, their ear, their neck, their lips, the eyebrow, maybe a bit of tufty hair on top, whatever it is. And because you're not looking down, there's a direct connection between what you're seeing and the way your hand is moving. Of course, when you finally do look down, it's kind of almost looks like a Picasso. It's not accurate. The eye has overlapped the ear, and the nose is a little bit up here, but there's something else happening. It's the character is 100% there, because every time when you're drawing someone, you look at it and then you look down and draw. You're drawing from memory, even if it's 2 seconds later. But if you're never looking down, there is no memory. It's direct. So it might not look exactly like the person, but it will give you the feeling of the person. And I thought that is really interesting. So I used to sit on the Underground in London, going backwards and forwards, journey after journey, and draw people opposite me on the tube, on the subway. And because I would, they're reading a newspaper, or they're asleep, or they're like falling into their hands, so because I'm not looking down, it doesn't look like I'm drawing them. I'm just sitting, wandering around like this and just drawing. So the signs that I'm drawing someone are not there. So I filled up pages and pages of mannerisms, studying people. So by the time I even picked up a camera, I really started to understand what happens with your weight when you lean. Why would you lean? What does it even mean? What happens when you sleep? What happens to all the muscles in your face? All these things are really beautiful. When you're preoccupied, what do you do with your finger on your eye? What happens when you push your eyebrow up? You get these lovely lines above, or all these things mean something. And it's funny, because within this, there's a whole universe of emotion and humanity. You just have to look harder. And most of us are distracted, that we don't actually look that closely into someone's soul if you study their face. And to the question that came earlier from someone about how do you avoid repetition? Well, you could say I've been repeating exactly the same thing for 40 years with the face, but everyone's face is completely different and conveys a different mood. So if we look hard enough, there are so many differences there. Okay.
So a little bit about what inspired you. We've got a question here asking, who are the photographers that inspired you most?
I've mentioned Bailey before. Irving Penn is probably the greatest influence on my portraiture. I had to memorize all their pictures, so I don't really look at their pictures anymore because I close my eyes and I see them, and the lessons I needed to take from them I already took. Now I just have to be my own man and make my own pictures. But I owe a great debt to Avedon, Bailey, Irving Penn. But then there's a whole load of other photographers. Robert Frank, for me, was a huge influence. His rawness, it's just an atmosphere. And his films I love. Pull My Daisy is if you should all try and watch that film. His short films are amazing. William Klein, big influence. We've already talked about Daido Moriyama, grain, and contrast. So in time, I will talk more and more about my influences, and I would love to show specific pictures that meant something to me. But Bruce Davidson, legendary photographer, I got to know Bruce quite well. And I had the pleasure to meet most of my heroes in photography. Bruce, I got to know pretty well. Interesting character. Mary Ellen Mark, I knew pretty well, actually. She had a studio opposite me, so we would often pass each other in the street. We'd eat in the same restaurants and cafes in Soho, so we would always chat about the business and stuff. But yeah, all these people have influenced me. If I look at their work now, it's honestly just because I want some joy and I want to just be reminded of how good they were. But the lessons I needed to take from them, I already took.
Malby here has a nice question asking about how you capture the gaze of the person you're photographing. How do you really bring those emotions to surface?
Okay, so emotion is a very important thing. And you can't just bring it to the surface. It has to, you have to have it there before you even dare to take a picture. So I can tell you a story. One of the first big missions I ever did was in Burma for human rights. Human Rights Watch came to this studio and the bosses of human rights, and they said, we had a meeting, and they said, we have a great challenge. They said that we have all the data, all the research about human rights abuses around the world, but the press don't really seem very interested. And it seems that numbers don't seem to inspire attention. And they asked if I could help humanize the data and turn the research they had and the numbers they had into human stories that might resonate more with people. So I thought this was very interesting. I did not know much about human rights at all. I knew the basics, but I hadn't really, gone in deep to that world. So I said, well, what are you thinking? They said, well, there's a forgotten country called Burma, a country ravaged by years of brutal dictatorship and civil war. And no one's interested. Aung San Suu Kyi, the de facto leader at the time, was actually in prison. And terrible human rights abuses. And they said, we would like to send you to Burma, to a remote outpost near the Thai border in the mountains, where a whole group of exiles are living who are all human rights victims and defenders who are fleeing the country because of the abuses of the dictatorship. We're talking about landmine victims. We're talking about children in orphanages. We're talking about women's rights groups, LGBTQ groups, human rights defenders across the board. So I thought, well, how much am I going to get paid? They said, nothing. I said, okay, well, it's going to be very expensive for my whole office to go there. Normally we're funded by an advertising agency or something, but they said there's not much money for this. So I said, well, how long is it going to take? And they said, well, could be 3-week trip, but it could be 6 or 8 months in terms of an entire project with pre and post production. So I said, okay. I said, is it dangerous? And they said, yeah. So I thought, why on earth should I do this, man? My wife had just had a baby. I was thinking, I'm not sure I want to subject my whole team to this kind of thing. So anyway, they were very persuasive, especially this great lady called Minky Warden, who became a dear friend of mine. So they said, they pushed, so I agreed, reluctantly. So after months of pre-production, research, security briefings, we all went off. It's a brutal journey. It was like a seriously long flight to Burma, I don't know, 25 hours. I don't know how long it is. And then an 11-hour car trip into the mountains to find these remote outposts where all these exiles were on the run, hiding. The first day we got there, we went to a community center type thing that was all former political prisoners who had been put in prison for years and then either escaped or cast out one day. And imagine being locked in a prison for 20 years. You lose touch with your family. You've probably got mental health issues, probably physical ailments as well. And they suddenly throw you out on the streets one day. You don't know anyone. You don't know where your family are. You don't have any friends. You've never seen a busy street for 20 years. So you can imagine the shock to the system. So this group of people formed a self-help group in this remote outpost, and I was sent there to photograph them. So I got there, and I looked around, and there's a line of people all waiting to be photographed. And I'm going to be honest, I was tired, I was stressed, I missed my family. I was not convinced that this is the right thing for my office because no one's paying us to do this. And I was actually genuinely worried that this commission or this commitment might bring down my office. So I looked around, and there was a notice board, and there was a year planner put on it. You know those old-fashioned things with January, February, March that we have in offices, and all the months laid out, and there was nothing on any of them. Nothing on the calendar, no events, no meetings planned except for that day's date. And there was some Burmese scribbles written in the corner. So while my assistants were setting up the lights, I went closer to see what the scribbles are, and they're in Burmese, so I couldn't understand them. This guy comes up to me. He's wearing a pink salmon tunic, and he whispers, very gentle voice, he says, "Today is the day." So I looked at him and I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "I'm translating what it says." He says, "Today is the day. Famous photographer Platon is coming to help us." Damn. That was the moment. My whole life stopped because I felt so ashamed of myself. For the first time, I stopped breathing because there I was feeling sorry for myself. And I realized that I'm all they've got. And I didn't know anything about human rights, and I certainly wasn't famous. They read into me something that was not real. But I was the only one there. There were no other real famous photographers there that day to highlight their stories or to bring attention to their struggle. So I got so choked. So I thought, well, I don't know anything about human rights. I know how to photograph people as powerful, as empowered, strong, courageous. That's what I've been doing for the covers of magazines. So might as well do what I do. So I rolled up my sleeves and I said to myself, I've got to become the person they need me to become. So the guy that approached me and translated for me, his name is Gogh, and he was a former political student. He was in a demonstration in Burma, and the demonstration was shut down by the junta, the military police. Some of his colleagues were killed. Gogh was put in prison for years and years. So eventually he was let out and he formed this group. And the salmon tunic he was wearing, he explained to me when I took his picture, is actually a traditional warrior's uniform. So we became friends, and Gogh turns out to be the most amazing, beautiful person. And when I did my recent book called The Defenders, which covers 20 years of human rights work, the Burmese section, the Burma Project, is in there as an entire chapter. And I invited Gogh to write an essay introducing the work representing his country. So he wrote me a beautiful letter which became the basis for the essay. And in the letter, he wrote some powerful words about freedom. And I actually have some notes here that I'd like to read you some of his words, because it's very powerful about what freedom really means. I was placed in a tiny cell with no natural light. Reading, writing, and studying were all banned. I realized my captors wanted to kill my intelligence and my humanity. I was tortured both mentally and physically. I was beaten, kicked, and forced to stand for hours on end. When my feet were too swollen to support my body, I collapsed with exhaustion. They pulled me up by my ears. At times, I thought I would die, but I slowly came to understand there was a reason I stayed alive. The portrait of me has now been seen around the world, he says, and that makes me proud. The portrait protects my dignity and encourages me to continue the hardships of fighting for justice and, above all, freedom. Can you show the picture of Gogh in my book? There he is, in all his glory, looking like a king. So this is a book we just had published this year. There it is. Heroes of our time. These are heroes I'm proud to have photographed. So there's emotion for you. It takes a while to discover a story, and you have to be curious and investigate and go beyond your own prejudices and frustrations to find out that the person who seems a stranger to you that day turns out to be one of the heroes of your life. So a big tribute to Gogh. And the picture where he's looking proud, you don't normally think of a human rights defender or a human rights victim standing proud like that, like a warrior, like a king, like a powerful person in society. So that's the way I see it. Anyway, that picture was seen around the world, and we got it published along with all the other pictures I did in over 100 news and media institutions around the world. And it was a total game changer, because it was one of the first times human rights is thought of with a different narrative, that these people are heroes. They are the leaders of our time. They're not just victims, and they have been victimized, but they're not victims. They're actually true leaders and cultural heroes of our time. So that's good to Gogh. Next question.
Yeah, so I thought we'd end this Q&A people are very curious. You just launched the trailer of your upcoming
Oh yeah.
film release, Portrait of a Stranger.
Yeah.
Do you want to give your fans a little insight into that project? Kind of give them, tell them what's to come.
Thank you. Yes. So the 20th of June
Yep.
is World Refugee Day.
Yep.
So some time ago, I invited. Big shout out to Dilly, by the way, a dear friend of our studio, friend of mine, who's an incredible film producer. So she was working for UNHCR, the division in the United Nations dedicated to refugees. And Dilly helped me hijack the High Commissioner for Refugees for an afternoon and bring him to my studio for a photo session. His name is Filippo Grande, and he is an amazing human being. I love him dearly. And in that, as we sat and chatted here that day, he confessed that one of the hardest things is persuading world leaders to think differently about refugees and this refugee crisis that we're all facing. And he said something really beautiful, and it just came into his head. He said, the nature of a human being, or the instinct of a human being, is to be nervous around a stranger. But once you know the stranger, that open hand of friendship is easy to extend. Boom. A penny dropped. At that moment, it all made sense what we need to do to help our friends at UNHCR, at the United Nations. So I pledged my support to him that day, and Dilly and I came up with this sort of cheeky plan to make a film interviewing and photographing and filming refugees from around the world, and hearing them not talk about their hardships and their specific journeys, but hearing them talk about their value system, what they hope for. What does leadership mean to them? What does trust mean to them? Because they know stuff that we don't know. They've experienced things that we, fortunately, have not experienced. So they have such a broad experience of the human condition. So we raised the money. We researched it for about a year. We went to Turkey, which is where I think it's the biggest country that housed refugees.
Most refugees,
Yeah.
At least the year we shot.
The year we shot, yeah. So we went to Istanbul and another city as well. And we built a giant film studio and invited refugees from all around the world that were based there, hiding, or not hiding, but like literally in transit. They were in this no man's state. And they all came and told us their stories. Some of them were musicians, so I got them to record elements of music over a certain key. And we brought all the material back, and we worked on it for about another year. And I took all the most beautiful phrases they said about life, and we cut it together into a film. And the film is called Portrait of a Stranger. And people from Afghanistan, from Ukraine, from Iraq, Iran, all Syria, Africa. But the interesting thing is I never wanted to say where they're all from, because actually I wanted to find a universal frequency that they are all speaking towards. So I took all the elements of music as well, and I created a composition and brought in all these different instruments that we had recorded and pieced it together. So we have now made a small trailer, which we have released for you all to see a few days ago. And it's almost like a really beautiful music video, actually. But the full-length film we will be posting on the 20th, right?
Correct, yep.
To celebrate World Refugee Day. And I am so excited by this YouTube channel, because finally, I don't need to go through a middleman. I don't need to go through a media and get people's permission and ask their guidance on edits. And I know what the edit is. The edit is done. The edit is good, man. This film is gorgeous, and the people speak to you from their soul. So how amazing that we've cut out the middleman, and now I've got a venue or a platform that I can release it to you direct, and you'll see these people speak to you. So on the 20th, please look out for it and watch it. And I hope you like it. And it's pumped with, I don't know how many, loads of brand new portraits that no one's ever seen. And share it with your friends, because the point of this is to spread goodwill and stimulate a much more respectful debate. I remember Tony Blair, the former Prime Minister of the UK, said to me in this studio, he said, when people are frightened, they close their minds. What we need to do is rekindle the spirit of optimism so we can open up our minds. Now, I thought that was quite interesting. So putting politics aside for a minute, this is a human story, and I ask you all to open up your hearts and minds and rekindle the spirit of optimism and spread the good word and share the film with your friends. And maybe it will help us all think a bit differently about the plight of refugees around the world. So with that said,
I think that's our time for
yeah.
today. Thanks
So
everyone for tuning in.
Yeah, thank you all for tuning in. I hope this was fun and interesting. We love doing this.
Yeah.
Thank you to, I'm going to turn you all around. So there's Mike and there is Michelle. And in time, what did you call it? A field trip?
Field trip.
Okay, well, if you can all see, if I'm going to tip it up, upstairs there is my library. And Mike is conjuring up a new bit of technology to help us go a little bit more mobile in my studio, get a bit more professional, aren't we? Just a bit, not too much. And I'm going to start taking you on field trips to my library upstairs and pulling out books that have been game changers for me. And that's when I can start saying, oh, look at this photographer and look at this artist and this sculptor. And we can just be a bit more loose with our inspiration. So anyway, thank you all so much for being part of this. Let's keep building this community. Spread the word if you can about our channel. We're very humble about starting from scratch. And as with always, I always have to earn everyone's trust. I'm not entitled to it. So I'm really enjoying this process of starting from scratch at this old age in my career. But it depends on you too to spread the word and try and get your friends to join us so we can grow this thing and keep sharing films with you. All right, so that's it, right?
That's a wrap.
All right, it's a wrap. Bye.